Hello, and welcome to the Anthropology of Human Rights, Anthropology 308, for the fall 2023 semester. I'm just going to go through the syllabus here, sort of give you the lay of the land with respect to the course, what the course is going to entail, what the expectations and evaluations are, how the course is going to unfold, this sort of thing. It's going to have two main sections. The first section, the first half of the course then, deals with the philosophical and to a lesser extent the historical backdrop of human rights in the way that they became congealed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the second deals with anthropological approaches to human rights. Now, the idea here is that the way that human rights were drafted in the Declaration has not necessarily been the way that anthropologists have picked up the notion of human rights, and that in some ways human rights have presented specific kinds of problems for anthropologists, but also specific kinds of opportunities. So we're going to look at the way that anthropologists then have taken human rights as an opportunity to think about particular sorts of social phenomena. For a typical week, for the Monday meeting, the online meeting, you'll have a video lecture available on the playlist on YouTube where you've already found this lecture, so you already know where it is. Good news. And so all the lectures are included there. Now, of course, you can watch them whenever you want. You can watch them twice if you want. You can pause and come back, go and have a snack. Whatever it is, you can watch them in the way that you want, at the pace that you want. But I've tried to record lectures that will fit into the time slot on Monday so that if you just want to have a regular Monday schedule, that's available to you. On Mondays, then, all you need to do is watch the lecture. On Wednesdays, we'll talk about the material in the readings and the material that I've covered in the lecture. So you should come to class prepared to talk about these things. It might be what you found particularly interesting or enabling or illuminating about the readings, or the things that gave you pause, the things that were troubling for you, or the things that made the readings difficult to follow, whatever the case may be. We'll talk about those things on the Wednesdays so that you can have a clear sense of what the readings are about and have an opportunity to talk about the things that you find most immediate and compelling about the readings. The first week is going to be a little bit different though. So in this week, you have, of course, today's introductory lecture, but also you have a lecture on the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, pictured here with Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the chair of the drafting committee of the Declaration. And the idea there is just that you get a clear sense of how human rights have been kind of solidified in this one particularly influential document. So then we'll meet on Wednesday so that we can talk about the Declaration and start to speculate about what anthropologists might make of it. Now, on the 4th of September, CSI is closed, and so on September 6th, when we meet, you're not going to have a video lecture before that class. Instead, we're going to look at a short piece drafted by Melville Herskovits, who was an anthropologist in the 1940s and 1950s, and he drafted this as the American Anthropological Association's contribution to the discussions around the drafting of the UN Declaration right after World War II, so 1945, 1946, when the drafting committee in the newly formed United Nations was starting to consider what they understood human rights to be and how they would codify them. The following week is when we start the sort of serious philosophical readings that were the backdrop of those conversations. we're going to be looking at three main figures: Immanuel Kant, John Stuart Mill, and John Locke. And we start with Kant, in part because I think the way that he develops the notion of dignity was probably one of the most foundational concepts for universal human rights to begin with. So that seems to me like a good place to start. Also, this is probably the most challenging of the readings, so it's nice just to get our hands around the most difficult reading, so that when we move on to the future readings, we feel like, okay, we've got our bearings, we're okay, we can handle this. So we start with Kant, and we start with Kant's not the entire groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, but a significant portion of it, so that we can get a grasp on what he means by dignity and how ideas of equality and freedom arise in the Declaration as an outgrowth of his work and of his influence. For the following 4 weeks, we're going to look at themes raised by John Stuart Mill on liberty. Now, only 3 of those weeks will be dedicated to reading his work. On September 25th, there's no class, and so for that week, we'll just meet at our regular time on Wednesday in order to watch a video on freedom of expression that's deeply influenced by Mill's work. Next, we turn to John Locke. Locke was a very important figure in theorizing property rights, so what it is that gives humans rights to property, and also on freedom from tyranny. 2 very important themes for the Declaration of Human Rights and for thinking about human rights that has followed. On week 10, we start the second part of the course. This is where we're looking at how anthropologists have engaged with human rights. We start with Mark Goodale, who's a very important anthropological writer on human rights, who gives us some of the important historical and theoretical backdrop to the way that human rights have posed a kind of problem or a set of problems for anthropology, and then how anthropologists have gone about trying to deal with these issues and study human rights anthropologically. So rather than philosophically, say, in the abstract, how anthropologists have gone about studying the social concreteness of human rights. Week 11, we look at a specific ethnographic text that examines it's part of a larger ethnographic project, but it looks at how Buddhists in Nepal have simultaneously embraced human rights to pursue particular sorts of political ends, but have also problematized ideas of the person and the self that arise within human rights documents, because they don't line up all that well with Buddhist notions of the self. And so this is a very, as far as I'm concerned anyway, it's a very interesting look at how specific kinds of tensions can arise when people try to embrace human rights, but might hold some deep convictions that are at odds with some of the preconceptions that seem to be baked in to human rights. For the remainder of the course, we're going to be looking at Harry England's ethnography, Prisoners of Freedom, Human Rights, and the African Poor. So this is also the book that you're going to be writing your final paper, your book review about. And so we'll look at the sections of the book that make up the body of the book. So we won't read the introduction, but we'll read all of the chapters throughout the body of the book, just to make sure that you're given an opportunity both to hear how I'm understanding the book, and you might disagree with that, the way that I'm understanding it, in which case that will be very interesting. That'll be a great thing to discuss in the book review. but then also to make sure that you have the chance to raise whatever concerns, confusions, lines of questioning, whatever it may be that you have about the book as we make our way through it. So there are going to be 3 forms of evaluation for the course. The first are reading journals. So you have your reading journal, your essay or your book review, and then finally participation. So the reading journals are going to be week by week things. And so for each week's readings, you will write a short journal entry. Now, these are not formal pieces of writing, so you don't need to worry about things like citations. You don't need to worry about like proper essay form or something. They're just your notes that you're providing for yourself on what each of the readings is about. So you can think of them in a way as your particular articulation of what the readings are about, but also you can think of it as an investment that you're making as you read in the work that you're finally going to have to do at the end of the semester, when you're going to have to bring some of these readings into a conversation with Harry England's, with his book as well. So that they're not just ways of making sure that you get the reading done. They are that. It's a way, you have to send them to me before the Monday class. So it's a way of making sure you get readings done before you watch the lectures in theory, or at least before you get into class on Wednesday. So there's that. But they're also a way of making sure that you have a way of saying what it is that you think is going on in each of these readings. Now, it's not important that the way that you read them and the way that I read them line up. That's not the important thing. That's what we talk about when we're in class, so that if you arrive at a different reading than I do, that's great. Now we've got something interesting to talk about. And indeed, if you can show me something in these readings that I haven't been able to see myself, then that's fantastic. I owe you a debt of gratitude if you're able to arrive at some kind of a reading that seems compelling to me, but that I haven't generated for myself. So that's excellent. This is a way of preparing yourself for that. They don't have to be long, though. They just need a few elements. They're going to be like a paragraph long, so maybe half or 3/4 of a page. Though, of course, you're welcome to write more if you want. It's your journal. Write as much as you like. You should have a line or two then summarizing the reading's main thesis or main argument. Another line or two describing how the writer supported this argument. Is there data involved? Were the writers relying principally on rhetoric? So, say, setting up a series of logical inferences rather than drawing on data? Both? Was there something else? How did they do it? How did they make the argument stick, in a sense? And then finally, and this will be a slightly longer section, you'll have a few lines explaining why you do or do not find the work convincing. So you're, in a sense, you're explaining to yourself as well as to me why it is that this work did or did not persuade you. Now, it's also worthwhile keeping a list of technical terms that each of the writer uses, along with a brief definition, like a point form definition of what those are, so that you have something that you can go back and refer to as the semester rolls on and as the particular themes from these readings crop up. So you're giving yourself a reference, in other words. Now, you email them to me, as I say, before the start of the Monday class. And the idea there is that you read them before you watch the lecture. But of course, if you watch the lecture first, I'm not going to know. So maybe you want to do that and then do the reading. Maybe you want to do the reading, then watch the lecture, and then write your journal entry. But I think the best way to do it is do the reading, write your journal entry so that you're figuring out what the reading is saying to you, then watch the lecture and see if they line up. And if they don't, if your reading and mine don't line up, then you can start to think about where we differ. And that's the stuff, as I say, that we can talk about in class. Now you'll notice that in the section where I've outlined the different values for each of the assignments, I've given these 30 points of your final grade. So 3 points each for 10 journal entries. Of course, we have more weeks of readings than that. So this is kind of like a built-in extra credit work if you want it. You can do up to 13 journal entries, and I will count them all. If they're on time, they get 3 points. If they're late, you'll still get a point. So it's worth doing them even if you're late. It's worth doing the journal entry to get that 1 point. And so that way you can actually get more than 30 out of 30 on your journal entries if you want the extra points. The final paper then is your review of Harry England's Prisoners of Freedom. You have to include at least one citation from the course readings, including the statement by Melville Herskovits that we look at the beginning of the semester, and then the selections by Kant, Mill, Locke, Goodale, or Levy. Describe England's argument and how he supports it, sort of the way that you would with a journal entry, but in a more formal and expanded way. Explain how the book engages not just with human rights, but also with anthropology. He's addressing both of those throughout the book. So pay attention to the way that he brings those together. And sometimes he brings anthropology to bear on human rights in a critical way, so that it's not just that he's describing human rights, but that he's making a certain kind of critical intervention about human rights through anthropology. And then finally, again, you evaluate the persuasiveness or shortcomings of the book. What is it that made the book work for you or fail for you? And of course, it might be both. There might be aspects of the book that you find completely compelling and other aspects that you just feel like they fall short. So describe them both. The papers must be a minimum of 900 words, so not particularly long, but of course you can write more if you want. And you have to include a list of works cited. Why is this? Because you need to have proper citation throughout the paper. One of the things then that I'm going to insist on, that I'll explain again in the next slide, is that you have to include direct quotations with page references. So you can summarize a passage and include a citation with a page reference. That's fine. But as well as that, you also have to have direct quotations from the sources. Okay, what else about this? Oh, right, book reviews. So there are book reviews of this book out in the world available. I've read them, so I know they're out there. Of course, you're welcome to read them. If you think that you can get your bearings straight by reading some other people's reviews of the book, by all means do that. That's a good resource. You can even cite them if you want. Not in place of one of the course readings, but as well as one of the course readings. You're, of course, welcome to do that. What you can't do, of course, though, is pass off the work that someone else has done writing a review as if it's your own work. And again, as I say, I've read these reviews, I'm familiar with them, and so I'm happy to see them reproduced in cited form, but I will not be happy to see them reproduced as if they're your own work. So just cite them properly, and then you're fine. Same thing goes with my lectures. If you want to draw on something that I've said in one of the lectures, you're welcome to do that. Just cite it. And you'll see in the website that I link to below here at the Purdue OWL, there are straightforward ways of citing a lecture. And so again, I don't want to read my own words coming back to me from my lecture as if they're your words, but I'm happy to read them if you cite them properly. That's great. An excellent source to help you avoid plagiarism and cite properly is the Purdue OWL. The link is there. It's also on the syllabus. And just like the journals, email the papers to me. So no hard copies for any of the work this semester. Everything you send to me by email. Last thing, it's regrettable that I have to talk about this, but this is a reality now. ChatGPT exists, and people sometimes are tempted to turn in work that has been generated by ChatGPT. So I'll say two things about this. One is I'm going to treat anything that's turned into me that is produced by AI as plagiarism. Why? Because you're turning in work that is not your work as if it's your own. So it's just a straightforward assessment of a 0 for that assignment as if it were plagiarism. The second thing that I'll say is, as tempting as it may be to draw on this, especially at stressful moments in the semester, it's also fairly clear to me when pieces are written by AI, and there's very good software that's now available that I can use to confirm if something is or is not produced by AI. And so I would much rather that you send me in something that is not as polished as you would like it to be, that is not complete the way that you would like it to be, but that you just couldn't get into the condition you want, rather than taking recourse to AI to produce a piece of writing instead. So that's sort of the end of the policing part of my introduction. Hopefully this won't come up, but I feel because it's come up in the last few semesters with increasing frequency, I feel now like I need to be clear about this from the outset, that I simply will not accept anything produced by AI, and it will be given a 0 if you do it. All right, so that's the end of the introduction. I look forward to seeing you in class, and to a great semester. Thank you.